The morning was gray, and rain fell hard against the city streets as Ryan's sleek black car came to a sudden stop near a crowded market. The billionaire, used to control and perfection, slammed the door open in frustration, muttering about bad timing and incompetent drivers. He was a man who built empires with logic and numbers, but that morning, nothing seemed to go his way. As he stepped out, the heavy rain splashed against his shoes, and for a brief moment, the chaos of the market caught his attention. People ran for cover. Vendors covered their goods with plastic sheets. And yet, amid all the noise and confusion, one small figure stood out. It was a woman, young, dressed in worn clothes that had seen better days, struggling to keep her fruit cart from being washed away by the storm. But what stopped Ryan in his tracks wasn't her struggle. It was her smile. Despite the cold rain, despite losing most of her fruit to the mud, she still smiled as she handed a bruised apple to a little boy who had been watching her quietly from under a nearby stall. "Take it," she said softly, her voice barely reaching over the rain. "You shouldn't be hungry in this weather." The boy hesitated, but took it, and she smiled wider, even as thunder rolled above. Ryan found himself unable to look away. He was a man surrounded by luxury, power, and people who pretended to care. But that woman, she gave away what little she had without expecting anything in return. Something about it disturbed him, like an unfamiliar ache inside his chest. He tried to shake it off, returning to his call, but even as he spoke to his assistant about meetings and deadlines, his eyes kept finding her. The wind tore through the market again, knocking over a basket of oranges from her cart. Ryan watched as she ran after them, laughing at her own clumsiness, not angry, not defeated, just alive. When his driver returned with help, Ryan's tone had changed. He didn't understand why, but he ordered the man to take a different route, one that passed by the market again. As his car pulled away, Ryan turned to glance out the window. The woman was still there, still smiling, still giving away fruit to a child. That image stayed with him long after the city lights blurred past. For the first time in years, Ryan felt that his wealth, his towers, his cars, his fame, all seemed strangely empty compared to one woman's simple act of kindness under the rain. He didn't know it yet, but that small moment on a crowded street was about to change everything he thought he knew about life, love, and what it truly meant to be rich. The next day, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about the woman from the market. Her smile, her words, and the way she faced the rain had left a mark on his thoughts, like a song that refused to fade. He had seen countless people chase him for money, pretend to care, and treat kindness like a business deal, but she was different. So, driven by curiosity and a strange feeling he couldn't explain, he returned to the same street the following morning. The rain was gone, replaced by sunlight that made the fruits on her cart glow with color. She was there again, arranging her apples and bananas carefully, humming a soft tune to herself. Ryan, dressed in his usual expensive suit, walked toward her. People stared. It wasn't every day a billionaire stopped at a fruit cart. She looked up and recognized him instantly. "The man with the broken car," she said with a small smile, wiping her hands on her apron. "Did the rain forgive you today?" He almost laughed, surprised by her calm tone. Without answering, he asked, "Why did you give those children free fruit yesterday? Don't you need the money?" She paused for a moment, then looked at him with quiet confidence. "Because hunger doesn't wait for wealth," she said simply, her voice gentle but sure. "If I can help someone eat, even once, that's enough for me." Ryan didn't know what to say. Her words were so simple, yet they carried a truth that shook something deep inside him. He reached into his wallet and handed her a few large bills, far more than the cost of a few apples. But she shook her head. "No, sir," she said softly. "I only take what's fair." Ryan frowned, not used to being refused. "It's a tip," he insisted. "You earned it." She smiled again, that same warm, peaceful smile he remembered from the rain. "Kindness isn't something you buy," she replied. "You give it, or it isn't real." Her words hit him harder than he expected. For a man who had spent years surrounded by people who measured worth in numbers and possessions, her refusal felt like a quiet lesson. He realized that this woman, standing before him in her simple clothes, had something he had lost long ago: peace. He bought a few fruits anyway, paying her the exact amount she asked for. As he walked back to his car, he felt strangely light, as if he had just left behind a burden he didn't know he was carrying. That evening, while sitting in his office overlooking the city, Ryan couldn't focus on his work. Her words echoed in his mind: "Hunger doesn't wait for wealth." For the first time in years, he began to question everything he had built. Maybe the value of a life wasn't in what you owned, but in what you gave. And maybe, just maybe, this woman had already given him more than he could ever repay. In the days that followed, Ryan found himself thinking about the fruit seller more often than he wanted to admit. Her words, her calmness, and the quiet strength in her eyes had unsettled him in a way that board meetings, profits, or even success never could. He tried to push the thought away, but every time he looked out of his tall glass office windows, he imagined her standing by that small wooden cart, surrounded by laughter, life, and simplicity. Finally, unable to resist his curiosity, he sent his driver to check on her. The report was simple. She worked from sunrise to sunset, never took long breaks, and always had a gentle word for those who stopped by. She never shouted, never complained, even when customers tried to bargain unfairly. She sold fruit with a smile and treated everyone, rich or poor, the same. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. For years, he had measured people by efficiency and results, never by heart. But now, a woman who sold fruit on the street was making him question his own worth. The next morning, without telling anyone, he returned to the market himself. He parked a few blocks away, wearing plain clothes so no one would recognize him. From a distance, he saw her moving with quiet rhythm, arranging fruits in neat piles. Her clothes were simple, but her eyes carried warmth. A little boy tripped near her cart, spilling the coins he had saved to buy an apple. Without hesitation, she gave him one for free and patted his head. "Next time, save it for school," she said softly. A few moments later, she noticed an old man trying to cross the busy street. Without caring about her cart or customers, she ran over and helped him across, shielding him from the traffic with her own small frame. Ryan stood there, frozen. There was no camera to record her good deed, no one clapping or praising her. She did it simply because it was right. Watching her, he felt a strange ache in his chest. When had he last done something kind, without expecting anything in return? When had he stopped caring about people and started caring only about profits? Her kindness wasn't loud, but it was powerful, the kind that didn't demand attention, but changed everything quietly. As he watched her return to her cart, brushing dust off her hands and smiling as if nothing had happened, Ryan realized how hollow his life had become. All the money, the fame, the luxury, none of it filled the emptiness that simple goodness could. That day, he didn't speak to her. He just watched in silence, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside him: respect, admiration, and perhaps the first flicker of a heart learning how to care again. The following week brought trouble to the little market. The city council had announced a massive construction project, a new shopping complex, that would replace all roadside vendors. The fruit seller's spot, the one she had stood at for years, was marked with red paint, signaling it would soon be gone. People in the market were panicking, some packing up, others shouting at officials. But she just stood quietly beside her cart, her face pale yet calm. She whispered, "If I lose this place, I'll find another. As long as I can work, I'll be fine." Those words reached Ryan through his assistant, who had overheard the news while running errands. Something in him tightened. For the first time, he felt protective, not out of pity, but out of admiration. He couldn't bear the thought of seeing her small cart taken away by bulldozers. That evening, he sat in his office, the lights of the city glowing below him. Normally, he would ignore such issues. Business was business, and he never got involved in local affairs. But this time was different. Her quiet dignity, her unshakable kindness, they haunted him. Without revealing his identity, Ryan called in a few favors. By midnight, documents were adjusted, permits delayed, and that section of the construction plan was temporarily postponed due to zoning complications. The next morning, workers arrived with confusion on their faces. The red paint had been washed away. The vendors could stay, at least for now. But that wasn't all. When the fruit seller arrived, she found a surprise waiting by her cart, a brand new umbrella to shield her from the sun, and sturdy wooden crates filled with fresh fruit. Her old supplies were neatly replaced, and everything looked as if it had been done by invisible hands. She stood frozen, looking around the empty street, and whispered, "Thank you," though no one was there to hear it. She thought maybe it was a blessing, a small miracle sent by fate. From across the street, inside a black car parked near the corner, Ryan watched her reaction. When she knelt to arrange the fruits and touched the umbrella gently, smiling with gratitude, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't used to feeling proud of small things. His pride had always come from numbers, deals, and profits, but this was different. Watching her happiness, knowing he had given her even a moment of peace, made him smile without realizing it. He leaned back in his seat, trying to understand why helping her mattered so much. Maybe it was because she represented everything he had lost: simplicity, kindness, humility. Or maybe, for the first time, he just wanted to do something good without expecting anything back. Whatever it was, as he drove away, the rain began to fall lightly again, just like the day he met her. And for once, Ryan didn't feel like the richest man in the city, just a man rediscovering what it meant to have a heart. Days passed, and the fruit seller couldn't shake the feeling that someone had helped her intentionally. The new crates, the expensive umbrella, and the sudden halt to the city project, it all felt too perfect to be coincidence. She asked around, quietly, and one of the local vendors whispered that he had seen a luxury car parked nearby on the same morning. Something in her heart told her who it was. She didn't know his name at first, but she remembered the man in the suit, who had once stopped to buy fruit in the rain and asked strange questions about kindness. That memory was clear in her mind. So, one morning, she wiped her hands clean, packed a few apples in a small paper bag, and made her way to the tall glass building that towered over the city, the headquarters of Ryan's company. The guards were confused to see a woman in simple clothes standing outside such a place, holding fruit, asking to meet the CEO. But there was something steady in her voice when she said, "Please tell him someone came to say thank you." Word reached Ryan's office quickly. He froze when he heard her name. He could have asked security to send her away, but instead, he told them to let her in. When she stepped into his office, her clothes were clean but modest, her eyes filled with quiet strength. She didn't look around at the luxury that surrounded her. She looked straight at him. "You helped me," she said softly. "You made sure I didn't lose my cart. You gave me new crates and an umbrella. Why?" Her tone wasn't accusing, but it carried something that made Ryan's throat tighten. He tried to smile and said it was just a small gesture, but she shook her head. "If you help me, let it not be out of pity," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I may be poor, but my work feeds me with pride. I don't want to be anyone's charity." Her words hit him harder than any criticism he had ever faced. For years, people had flattered him, feared him, or pretended to respect him for his wealth. But here was someone who saw through it all, who valued her dignity more than his money. He realized that she wasn't just surviving poverty, she was defeating it every single day with grace. In that moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, humility. He stood, walked to her, and said quietly, "You're right. I didn't help you out of pity. I just didn't know how to help someone strong without making them feel weak." For a brief moment, they both stood in silence. Then she smiled faintly, placed a small paper bag of apples on his desk, and said, "Then let's call it even." When she left, Ryan sat alone in his grand office, staring at the apples. For the first time in his life, he felt that someone had given him something money could never buy. Respect born from truth. After that first visit to her office, Ryan couldn't stop thinking about the fruit seller and the world she lived in. The city streets, which he had always seen as chaotic and inconvenient, now felt alive with stories, struggles, and simple joys. He started walking to the market himself, sometimes in his car, sometimes on foot, just to observe. Every visit revealed something new. A young boy helping his mother sell bread, an elderly man offering advice to newcomers, neighbors sharing what little they had with one another. The fruit seller was always at the center, not commanding attention, but quietly guiding, encouraging, and helping wherever she could. Ryan watched her laugh with customers, handing out a small piece of fruit to a hungry child, and the way she calmed arguments with just a few words. It was a world so different from boardrooms, contracts, and spreadsheets, yet it was richer in ways he had never known. He began talking to her, asking questions about daily struggles, about what she needed to make life easier for herself and others. She answered honestly, never asking for anything in return, but always making him realize the impact small acts could have. Slowly, something shifted inside him. He couldn't ignore the stark contrast between the wealth he managed and the joy and resilience he saw in the market. He began thinking of ways to help without taking away dignity, without turning kindness into a transaction. One afternoon, he approached her with a proposal. He wanted to start a community project to support small vendors like her, providing equipment, clean stalls, and fair access to customers, all without interfering with their independence. She was skeptical at first, not trusting that a billionaire's money could come without strings attached. But he explained that this was not about charity or recognition, but about honoring courage, perseverance, and honest living. With her guidance, he launched the project quietly, letting her introduce him to the other sellers, listening to their stories, and learning how best to help. Over weeks, he saw transformations. Worn-out carts were replaced with sturdier ones. Market corners became safer, and children who once went hungry were getting meals from community kitchens supported by the project. Ryan began to understand what real impact meant. It wasn't about the largest profit margins or flashy publicity. It was about building something that mattered, that nurtured life and dignity. And he realized that all of this started with one woman's quiet courage and her unwillingness to compromise her values. Every time he returned to the office, he thought of her laughing with a customer, her hands sticky from fruit juice, her eyes sparkling with warmth. It wasn't just the market that had changed. Ryan felt himself changing too. For the first time in years, he felt that his wealth was not a symbol of power or status, but a tool to create real, meaningful change. And in that realization, he found a new kind of satisfaction, one that no boardroom, no deal, and no title could ever give him. A satisfaction born from seeing life, courage, and love thriving, because he finally learned how to support it without replacing it. The city had been preparing for rain all week, but no one expected the storm that night. Dark clouds swallowed the skyline, thunder rolled like distant drums, and rain fell in thick sheets that blurred the streets and tore through the market. Ryan, sitting in his penthouse, felt a sudden pull in his chest and need to know that she and her little market were safe. Without thinking twice, he grabbed his coat and drove through the lashing rain, wipers barely keeping up with the torrents. When he arrived at the street where she sold her fruits, the scene that greeted him made his heart drop. Stalls were overturned, crates scattered, umbrellas shredded, and puddles formed rivers along the uneven pavement. Amid the chaos, she sat on the wet ground, beside what was left of her cart. A single basket of fruit clutched to her chest as if it were a treasure. Her clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her face, yet she didn't scream, curse, or panic. Ryan ran to her, water soaking through his shoes, and called her name. She looked up at him with tear-streaked cheeks and, remarkably, a calm smile. "Everything breaks one day," she said quietly, her voice steady against the howl of the wind. "What matters is what we build after." Ryan could barely breathe. He had faced boardroom disasters, financial collapses, and endless crises, but nothing had struck him like the quiet strength of this woman in the middle of ruin. He tried to help her to her feet, but she waved him off, her eyes already scanning the wreckage, deciding what to save, what to toss. Her calmness was not submission. It was resilience. She handed him the small basket of fruit she had protected through the storm, as if saying that even in loss, something good could remain. Ryan felt a lump in his throat. He realized that all the wealth in the world could not teach the kind of courage she displayed. He stayed there through the rain, helping her salvage what she could, lifting crates, mending torn tarps, and slowly building a small shelter with the broken parts. She instructed him gently, correcting his overenthusiastic movements, reminding him to take care of himself too. As the storm began to ease, puddles reflecting the dim light of the street lamps, Ryan looked at her and saw not devastation, but hope. Each decision she made, each careful action, carried the weight of someone who understood that life's storms could destroy anything, but the heart and effort to rebuild would always endure. That night, as he drove home, soaked and shivering, he kept replaying her words over and over in his mind. What matters is what we build after. It wasn't just about fruit, markets, or even his own understanding of life. It was about courage, humility, and the strength of the human spirit. For Ryan, that storm didn't only destroy a market, it shattered the walls around his own heart, leaving room for empathy, respect, and a lesson that no amount of money could ever buy. The morning after the storm, Ryan arrived at the market with crates, tarps, and tools, ready to help rebuild what had been destroyed. He expected her to let him take the lead, to instruct him while he did all the work, but she had other plans. She was already there, sleeves rolled up, boots caked in mud, her hands gripping pieces of broken wood and torn cloth. "We rebuild together," she said with a small smile that left no room for argument. And so, side by side, they started the long, messy process. Ryan realized quickly that rebuilding a market stall in the mud was nothing like running a boardroom or signing contracts. It was harder, slower, and required patience he hadn't used in years. She laughed when he fumbled with a tarp, joking that he clearly wasn't used to real work, and he couldn't help but smile back. Her laughter was light, infectious, and it made the task less daunting. As they worked, she shared stories about her life, the struggles of the market, and the children she helped daily. Ryan listened, amazed at the resilience it took to live with so little, yet give so much. He realized that for all his money and success, he had never truly understood how people survived, laughed, and loved without expecting anything in return. Hours passed as they lifted crates, nailed broken wood, and arranged fresh fruits. The mud squelched under their boots, and rain threatened to return, but neither of them paused. When Ryan slipped and nearly fell into a puddle, she caught him with a grin, teasing him gently, and he laughed harder than he had in years. That laughter, mingled with the sound of hammering and water dripping from tarps, felt like something new blooming inside him, a feeling of connection, of shared effort, and of humanity. The stall slowly took shape, sturdier than before, with the new umbrella shading the fresh fruit and a small sign painted by her own hand. She stepped back and inspected their work, eyes sparkling with quiet pride. "Not bad for two people who usually never do this," she said, nudging him lightly. Ryan looked at the rebuilt stall and then at her, realizing that the lesson wasn't in the fruit or the wood. It was in the act of building together, in the shared struggle, and in the simple joy of helping someone in need. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel the weight of wealth or titles. He felt alive, human, and connected. Something inside him began to heal. The part that had been hardened by deals, ambition, and self-interest softened with every nail hammered, every crate lifted, and every story shared. By the time the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light on the muddy street, the stall was complete. But Ryan knew the transformation had gone beyond wood and fruit. He looked at her, smiling as she arranged the fruits, and understood that this was more than rebuilding a market stall. It was the beginning of rebuilding himself, piece by piece, side by side with a woman who taught him that true strength lay in humility, kindness, and the courage to face life together, no matter the storm. Weeks passed after the storm, and the market returned to its usual rhythm, vibrant with voices, laughter, and the scent of fresh fruits and spices. Ryan found himself coming more often, not just to check on the community project or ensure the stalls were secure, but because he wanted to be near her, to witness the quiet way she brightened everyone's day without asking for anything in return. He noticed how she moved through the crowd, offering help to the elderly, sharing advice with young sellers, and laughing with children who clung to her hands for a taste of fruit. Each gesture, each word, made something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in years, an unfamiliar warmth, a pull that went beyond admiration or respect. One afternoon, as they were arranging crates together, Ryan felt an overwhelming need to speak what he had been holding inside. He stopped for a moment, looking at her hands carefully stacking the apples, and then at her face, framed by sunlight that caught in her hair. His heart pounded, and he swallowed hard, realizing that what he felt was no longer just gratitude or fascination. It was love. Not a superficial attraction, not admiration for beauty alone, but a deep, sincere love for her courage, her honesty, and the way she carried herself with dignity in a world that had given her so little. Gathering his courage, he spoke, voice low but steady. "I need to tell you something. I care about you, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. Not for your looks, but for your strength, your heart, and the way you make me feel alive again." She froze for a heartbeat, her hands pausing mid-motion. Ryan's chest tightened, fear creeping in. He had never been this vulnerable. He didn't know if she would laugh, reject him, or feel awkward. But instead of answering immediately, she looked at him calmly, her eyes soft and steady. A faint smile curved her lips, and she said, "Love is proven in action, not words." Her response wasn't a denial, nor a promise. It was a challenge, a quiet lesson in patience, humility, and respect. Ryan felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Her words meant that if he truly cared, he would continue to show it through his deeds, his presence, and his support, not just through declarations. He nodded slowly, understanding that love was not something to demand or declare, but something to nurture and prove through consistent, heartfelt action. That day, as they continued working side by side in the market, Ryan realized that the path ahead wasn't about instant happiness or easy answers. It was about trust, commitment, and living the values she held dear. And in that realization, his heart felt full, not because it had been confessed, but because he had found someone who taught him the real meaning of love, something patient, enduring, and rooted in action rather than mere words. Years had passed since the day Ryan first saw her struggling with her fruit cart in the rain. Yet the memory of that moment remained vivid in both of their minds. The city had changed, and so had they, but the lessons learned in those early days never faded. The street where she once sold fruits, weathered and uneven, was now transformed into a vibrant marketplace filled with small vendors, each with sturdy stalls, fresh produce, and the warmth of community around them. This change was not a sudden gift, but the result of years of dedication, planning, and care. Through a foundation Ryan had established in her honor, a foundation meant to support independent sellers, ensure fair prices, and provide resources without taking away anyone's dignity. She stood beside him now, no longer just the humble fruit seller, but his wife, a partner in both life and vision. Yet she still sold fruits from a small stall, not for money or status, but to remind herself, and those around her, of the journey she had walked. Children still ran to her for a piece of fruit, neighbors still sought her guidance, and every smile, every interaction, carried the same sincerity as it did years ago. Ryan watched her, marveling at the balance she maintained between her simple heart and the influence they now had together. Their love had grown quietly, nurtured through shared challenges, mutual respect, and acts of kindness that went far beyond words or declarations. The marketplace thrived, not because of money alone, but because of the trust, empathy, and dignity she instilled in everyone who became part of it. Stories of their journey spread through the city. Tales of a billionaire changed by a woman who had nothing yet gave everything, who taught him that true value was measured in compassion and courage rather than wealth or power. People visited the market, not only for fruits and goods, but to witness the legacy of kindness. To see that even in a world obsessed with material success, hearts guided by generosity could build something enduring. Ryan often reflected on how far they had come, thinking about the rainy day when impatience had threatened to cloud his judgment, and how one small act of quiet bravery had altered the course of his life. Standing beside her now, he realized that their story was not about riches or titles, but about the impact of love, empathy, and shared vision. Together, they had created more than a marketplace. They had created an empire of the heart, a living proof that the smallest acts of generosity, humility, and courage could ripple outward, changing countless lives. And as she handed a slice of fruit to a child who ran up with wide eyes, Ryan smiled, knowing that the woman who once stood alone with the fragile cart had not only captured his heart, but had inspired a legacy that would outlast them both. A legacy of love, resilience, and the unshakable belief that kindness, not money, builds true empires.